It's an out of order death. Out of order. Your children aren't supposed to die before you. Spencer was very busy, very vivacious, outgoing. As a baby, he had bright blue eyes and white blonde hair and freckles, and he was always moving. He never stopped moving. I was that mom that had to have the little harness because he was a runner. When he was in kindergarten, within the first couple of weeks, the teacher came out and asked to talk to me after school, and she said, Spencer wants to be in charge. And he wants to help me teach. So I've given him some special projects so he can be in control of some things. And he ended up developing a crush on that teacher, actually, and would pick her flowers. And he told me one time he wanted to kiss Mrs. Jones. I thought that was the cutest thing. I said, well, Mrs. Jones is married to Mr. Jones, so you'll have to find a different girlfriend. But so he was always... He needed to have some element of control in school, and if it was boring, he would check out. Spencer was diagnosed with ADHD at about 2, so we knew we had to keep his mind and his body very busy. Otherwise, he didn't really pay attention too much. Didn't have a lot of focus, unless it was something he loved, and then he could hyper-focus. I don't know, I kind of feel like Spencer was... there's a term, an old soul, like he'd already been here before and done it all. So he's just like, I just need to get past all this little kid stuff to the good stuff. Yeah. And he was always wanting to try something new or go somewhere new or meet somebody. He knew so many people. So he was a fun kid, but he was mischievous. So he tested us. He's the oldest of my 3, so he was the trailblazer. And he definitely tested us. He was defiant and very independent, very stubborn. His way or the highway. So, but the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So, but I'm also the oldest of 3 kids, so maybe it's an oldest sibling thing. I don't know. But he always had a great group of friends, and his brother and sister, they were like the 3 amigos. They were all 25 months apart, very, very close. And they always teased each other. He was into every sport. I always say anything with a ball. So baseball, basketball, football, and then anything with a board. So he surfed, he wakeboarded, he scootered, skateboarded, you name it, he did it. Snowboarded. His favorite sport was baseball. He pitched and he caught, and he even became an umpire in high school. He even thought he might become a professional umpire. He looked into it one time. But that's how much he loved the sport, and he owned that field. Like, he was never afraid of a parent. He was never afraid of a coach. It was his field. Hilarious. He was like the youngest umpire with all these old guys. He did girls softball, he did Little League, but then he moved on to do high school and then some travel baseball, kind of at a competitive level. So he was up there with, doing some pretty high-level baseball. I think the ADHD, we tried to manage that with good diet and sports and activity, and didn't really want to try any of the commonly prescribed prescription drugs for ADHD. And so he was pretty successful trying to stay on the straight and narrow and stay out of trouble and do okay in school without them. And then he got into middle school, and it got everything ratcheted up a little bit in terms of freedom and a lot more kids that he was around. And so he wanted to go ahead and try some of the common prescription. So his pediatrician prescribed one, but he didn't like the side effects. They were terrible. So he only did them for like a year. And then I was always worried because a kid with ADHD, they don't make enough dopamine for their brain. Dopamine is the feel-good drug that keeps your mood and your emotions stable. And that's why they lose focus. That's why they're always seeking something to fill what they're kind of missing in their brain chemicals. So I was always worried that he would, self-medicate. And this was a time in California where they were really pushing legalizing marijuana. And so he, the lobbyists were out there and pushing it, and it's good for you, and it's going to help you, it's going to calm you down, it's all that. So, I think he did start experimenting with marijuana, and I think he thought that was going to help him. But unfortunately, what we've learned now, since it has been legalized, we've been able to study it. And in kids under 25, they develop actually more problems. They can develop depression, the link to suicidality, anxiety, all kinds of terrible things. And unfortunately for Spencer, he developed some anxiety. So trying to manage that. I was in the middle of a divorce, and that was really hard on my 3 kids. And I went back to work full time. So there was just a lot of upheaval. And yeah, he did then try to self-medicate for the anxiety. They would never give Xanax to a kid. They're never going to give Xanax to a kid. They don't even give it now anymore. You can barely get it as an adult because, the shift in our healthcare from overprescribing to now almost underprescribing. And then there's very little help for, mental health, and you try to get a teen into a counselor. We did all that. I got him into a counselor. We did some, behavioral training and some talk therapy, and I even tried to get him into somebody who would do some brain wave type stuff, biofeedback. He didn't like that. He was very outspoken about what he liked and didn't like. But yeah, he definitely struggled. But fortunately, we knew I was on it all the time, and we were able to, his dad and I were able to intervene for him, and we did get him some help, and he did get cleaned up and start on a really good track. And he graduated high school. He said, "Mom, I want to go to school. I want to be an EMT." He wanted to be on an ambulance, and and then maybe a firefighter. I was like, okay. So I was like, the kid that didn't do great in school, all of a sudden he goes to the local junior college and he gets all A's, and in a semester, he gets his EMT certification, he passes his tests, and he is just beyond thrilled. He's healthy, he looks good, he's enjoying life. He says, "I want to be a firefighter." He applies to the fire academy, he gets accepted, they nominate him crew chief. He's got a girlfriend, he's working at the Chick-fil-A, and it's very hard to get a job at Chick-fil-A because you have to be super outgoing and have a bright smile and have just amazing customer service. Like, he beat out 100 candidates to get that job. And then I was like, oh, this kid, he's on his way, right? We've left this other stuff behind, and, he's done the work, and then COVID hit. And I think all the stuff that he'd learned to keep his brain calm, and, school was shut down. Nothing was in person. His gym was shut down. And he'd wanted to move out. He'd turned 20 in May, and he wanted to move out. And we said, okay. He moved out into his own apartment. He had a roommate, but just a shared apartment. And I don't know. We don't know what happened. We don't know why he went from doing great to struggling, or maybe it was just a moment, a decision, one of those impulsive decisions. The story is similar. I've talked to so many parents who've lost kids this way, and I think he had an impulsive moment. Maybe he was feeling down. Maybe he was feeling some anxiety from all the COVID. And instead of, turning back to mom and dad to say, "Hey, Mom, I'm struggling," again, I go back to how he was as a little boy. He's so fiercely independent, and he wanted to prove himself as a man and, move out. I've got this. I'm in control, right? So he reached out on Snapchat and asked for 2 I say pressed pills, but that's because that's what they're called now. But at that time, 2 pills that he probably, I'm sure, thought were legitimate. I believe there were Xanax. I'm not sure. His case is still under investigation, even this late, because it'll be 4 years in September. Two pills. We think he took one because there was one on the nightstand. And he didn't wake up. And his roommate didn't think to check on him. His door was closed. You know, he was living in an apartment about 15 minutes from us. And his girlfriend, actually, they shared locations. And she noticed, she'd talked to him the night before, probably around 9 o'clock, said goodnight. She thought he wasn't sounding okay, but she lived like 40 minutes away, and I don't think it was enough to raise her radar. And so, but the next morning he was supposed to go to work, and she saw that he never left his apartment. And she was in school she's now graduated. She's now a registered nurse. Just most beautiful girl. She was going to be the nurse and he was going to be the firefighter. So she reached out to my daughter, who was 16 at the time, and said, "Hey, Spencer, he didn't go to work." And so she actually drove. She'd just gotten her driver's license, and so she drove over to his apartment. She saw he had his car and his motorcycle were in the lot, and she could see through the window in his door, and she could see his shoes in there, but no signs. She knocked and knocked and hung around for like 5 minutes and didn't get him. You know, she tried to call him, and so she then called me. And I don't know if it's intuition or just something inside me. I just had this fear. Like, I just was overwhelmed with fear. And I told my husband, I said, "We have to go over there right now." And I called his dad. And so his dad's also remarried. And the four of us met at the apartment complex. And I actually called the police on the way over there saying, I'm not sure, but we need to do a welfare check. You know, can you please meet us at the property? But they wouldn't break into the door. And we were trying to raise the property manager to let us in. And I'm like, "You guys don't know. This could be life or death. You don't know. I need to get in there." And so the two dads, Spencer lived on a second floor. One is boosting the other one up to the balcony and hoping that the slider was open. And indeed it was. And so my husband got in first, unlocked the front door, and we all just went running in. And my husband got to him first. He was in his bedroom. And it was late in the day. It was evening by then, and there was no lights on. You could just see him. He was just laying on his bed as he was in his clothes from probably the day before, and his feet were on the ground. He just looked like he had laid back to go to sleep. He looked like an angel just laying there, except he wasn't moving. And when my husband got to him, he wasn't breathing. And then the police came running in, and they pushed us all out of that room. And I actually never got to him. Roger stopped me, and he said, "No, he's cold." He was trying to protect me. But I didn't get to see him again till he was in his casket 10 days later. He was too gone to be revived. And from our timeline, he'd probably died the night before because the fentanyl takes you so fast. And the coroner says that if it wasn't for the fentanyl, he wouldn't have died because there was Xanax in his system. I think he thought he bought a Xanax to help his anxiety. And it killed him because I don't think he knew there was, how would he, nobody even knew what fentanyl was in 2020. Not in our area. And Spencer was pretty savvy, you know. Spencer didn't want to die that day. I think he just wanted to help for his mental state. And he lost his life. And there's no going back. You know, he never got to graduate college or get married or have kids. You know, his sister's turning 20 this summer. She's going to be the age that he was, and his brother is now 2 years older. You know, everywhere I go, I look for him in other people. What would he look like? Who would he be today? So I do these things to tell his story so that it doesn't happen to somebody else. There's no word, because there's nothing more tragic or painful. And no one can know it but you. There's a really famous and very well-known grief therapist. His name's David Kessler, and he's written all kinds of grief books, and he has online. I mean, he's amazing. And I've actually seen him speak, and he's written some books. He wrote books with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who is the author of Death and Dying and the 5 Stages of Grief. And he had co-written some books with her. She has since passed. But David was this amazing counselor. He's counseled in his career thousands of people who've lost loved ones. And it wasn't until the loss of his own son that he said, I wish I could go back to everybody I ever have counseled who's lost a child and write them a letter of apology. He goes, I thought I knew what I was saying and the advice I was giving. He says, you cannot possibly know until you've lost a child. That's become my mission, actually. So, because when Spencer died, it was COVID. Try to find a grief therapist in lockdown. Trying to find a therapy group or a bereaved parent group when you're in lockdown. So I made it my mission to find every resource in my community. Bereaved parents groups, online Zooms, wherever. I actually did find a therapist that was meeting in person who had also lost her son. I didn't want to talk to anybody else who didn't know my pain. You can't possibly counsel me if you don't understand my pain. And not like this. And she was amazing. But I knew that I needed to find help for myself because I didn't want to ruin my marriage. I didn't want to lose my other 2 kids. You know, I needed to help them. My parents, you know, it's not just my own grief. It's watching my children suffer, their siblings, right? And my mother and my dad suffer, my husband, my stepkids. You know, it's such a ripple effect till you lose a young person. You lose all of their future and everything that you would have had. It's just the devastation. And you can't stop thinking about it. It's all consuming. So I spent a lot of time working on my own grief, but that's led me to attend and get certified as a traumatic grief educator. I'm currently doing an grief education certification because I want to walk alongside other parents on the same journey. And I work with groups in my county where I get a call. Hey, we just lost another one, or they're going to be going through a trial. Can you please reach out? Some of us bereaved moms will attend their funeral. And I have all those compiled resources that I can say, here's an art group for the younger sister, or here's a bereaved mom's group, or a bereaved dad's group, or here's a great counselor. Here's the top 5 books that I would recommend. Did you want to meet for coffee? Can I come to your child's funeral? Can I hold your hand? Because the biggest thing is when you lose a child like this, in a manner in our country to a drug, you get victim blamed, you get parent shamed, and for me personally, I want to help other people so that and you think you're so alone. You don't know that anybody else knows your pain. And so to have that connection, to know that somebody else knows your pain, it's a gift. So That's what I've been working on. And it's all in his name. It's his legacy is what I can share and help other people. I speak in schools, middle schools and high schools. There's a program in our county called the One Pill Can Kill. And it's through our DA's office. And I think in the last 2 years, we've talked to over 40,000 kids. And they come up to us and they hug us. And I know that they'll remember his name and his story. So he didn't get to be a firefighter. He didn't get to be an EMT. He's not saving lives that way, but maybe indirectly through me, he's saving lives. Unfortunately, it was the cost of his own. But that's his legacy now.